I'll do this again. Hi, I'm Phil Vincent. I'm sitting with my colleague Mike Corrigan, and we are the authors, along with Doug Grove, of Multidimensional Education, a common sense approach to data-driven thinking. Mike, in the book, we have cited an enormous amount of research that indicates that if parents are involved in the school with their kids, that those kids do much better academically. And yet we constantly run into schools and school situations in which people say, I just don't want to try to get in touch with the parents. They're not involved. Why? With such a valuable resource, are we ignoring that?
Well, they're parents like you and me. Teachers don't want to have to listen to me. No, I mean, I'm kidding, but, well, maybe not. But they're typically, I think what we find with our friends that are teachers and from our experiences is that there's always one or two parents that every year, if not more, that are just a little annoying. You know, they're very time consuming, they're demanding, and I think a lot of teachers get that perspective, that idea that all parents are going to be this way, or if they invite more parents in or try to work with more, that they're going to have to deal with more difficult parents. And I think in reality what we've seen is that you're never going to avoid the difficult parent. They are going to be there whether you want them or not, right? They don't go away. That's why they're difficult. So I think when we're out working with folks and doing workshops and doing our thing we do with multidimensional education, we often try to encourage teachers to look at the research on parent involvement, on parent engagement, and look what this really means, because in reality, for the teachers who know this and for the principals who know this, that when you have a class and that teacher is connected with those parents and those parents like that teacher or there's lines of communication, the parents and the teachers are on the same page. When we have a class that isn't connected, often the students come home and say one thing, you know, and the parents hear another. I was at a meeting recently with one of my kids' teachers, and she said, I'll only believe half of what your kids tell me, and I would appreciate it if you did the same, you know, because often kids hear one thing, they come home and tell the parents, or they come to the classroom and tell the teacher a certain thing. So I think, one, it's a perception issue that's holding us back, but when we really look at the research, you know, and consider what we know from parent involvement, well, we know academic achievement goes up when we get parents more involved. We know that behavior issues are avoided more often, and social and emotional development is increased when we have parents involved. And there's all these meta-analyses and all these different studies that have gone out and shown time and time again. And there's this one study I found really interesting that we cited in there where some folks up in the Northeast did a study on parent involvement and found that when you have a high level of parent involvement, meaning the parents are helping the kids with homework, they're connected with the teacher, there's a number of different things they assess, that is worth $1,000 per student. So if your state's spending $6,500 per student, right, then basically by just getting parents involved, it's $7,500, and most states can't afford that right now.
Right.
And I think that's one thing that always alarms me is when I'm at meetings or working with schools and I hear about parent-teacher organizations, you know, PTO or the PTA, and they're trying to raise monies, and they're doing all these fundraisers to get the kids money or get the monies to give to the schools to help the kids. Well, it's normally around, I don't know, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 in more affluent areas for like elementary schools. Right. And they spend all year long, you know, 30 parents out of the 300, 400 kids there working to raise monies. And a lot of parents don't want to be involved in fundraising. But if we can figure out a better way to get them involved, I mean, look at the 400 times 1,000, you know, compared to the $30,000 or $40,000 they're raising.
Simply looking at it financially, it would behoove us to spend a lot of extra time trying to connect to families and to find out, perhaps not simply come to school, but what are some skills that you could bring to the schools? What is your area of interest? So in other words, instead of saying just come here and we'll assign you something, brother, what can you bring to schools? And our experience has been some of the schools we've worked with that have done an outstanding job on this have found all different ways to get parents involved in schools. One in particular was very interesting. When deer season comes, the parents of the school will come there at the rendering plant near the school. It's actually built onto the high school, and they will help when people bring deer in and things like that. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but what is of course occurring is there is another father or mother who is connected to that school and connected to kids in that school. That can make a difference.
Well, beyond defining what deer rendering plant
Yeah.
means, I think there's some other examples we can use too, and that is, I think the major thing that comes from that is that if you have more parents involved, if you have more parents there taking part in communicating with the teacher, well, quite honestly, I know some teachers might be watching this and say, well, we like that 20 or 30,000 because it actually buys us some supplies we don't have monies for, and I agree, but I honestly think, and have seen in some places, that schools that have more connected parents, when we have 40% of those parents working closely with kids, one, test scores go up, two, behavior goes down, behavior issues go down, three, you have more parents involved and actually fundraising goes up, so there's a whole thing there. And as we explain in the book as well, we have this concept we've been sharing with individuals we worked with or with school systems we've worked with called College Club. And it's all about how do we get them involved. It's just like the secret to intercultural communication. Let's not point fingers at our differences or our shortcomings. Parents aren't coming to plays. They're not doing this. They're not buying this jewelry we sold for the last 4 years. Let's not point fingers, and parents shouldn't do the same, but let's look at similarities. What do we all have in common? And when I used to teach intercultural communication, I'd be like, we must look for similarities. So when I meet someone from a different culture or different background myself, one thing we normally have in common, if they're an adult, we have kids. We have family, we have dysfunctional brothers. We can relate to something, and I think everything that most parents can relate to, and no matter if they're poor, rich, or middle class, they want the best for their children.
Right. Well, Mike, thanks very much for your insights on this, and I hope those of you who are from areas in rural areas, you understand what rendering means, and those of you who do not, perhaps you can get in touch with us at MDED and we can send you a little bit of information on that. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thank you.